Although not all video game spin-offs are a bad idea, whether it was bringing back Dungeon Keeper or GoldenEye to bank on a franchise's past glory, publishers have a tendency to cash in on well-known and well-loved IPs for all the wrong reasons. Numero uno being that they can make a quick buck off name recognition alone, without having to do all of that hard work nonsense to earn the respect of players. But whether it's sheer laziness, lack of funding, or an eagerness to milk a franchise's popularity for all it's worth, the industry has given birth to some utterly terrible abominations over the years that have unfortunately besmirched the names of otherwise great video game franchises. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 awful video game spin-offs that insult the original. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10. Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. Were it not for Guerrilla Cambridge's Killzone Mercenary, maybe, just maybe, Nihilistic's Black Ops Declassified could have escaped some of the criticism it attracted for being an ugly, full-priced, and incredibly buggy Vita title. I mean, if you owned Sony's console at launch, all 100 people who did, what would you rather play? A spin-off handled with care by an offshoot studio from its parent company, or a thinly veiled cash-in phoned out to an external developer? But then Activision is just as accountable for the horrendous rush job of this COD spin-off as its developer. Sure, they didn't directly create a game with terrible controls and frustrating gameplay, but it was their arrogance. The belief that a slimmed-down, diluted Call of Duty formula would still sell like hotcakes thanks to the brand name alone that no doubt resulted in this terrible experience. Declassified is the epitome of a half-baked idea, and was unfortunately indicative of the way many third-party studios treated the underrated Vita. Number 9. Castlevania Judgment. Every third-party developer wanted a slice of the motion-controlled pie during the years of the Wii's dominance, and Konami's attempt at printing money from your nan looking for another Wii Sports was Castlevania Judgment. A 3D fighter that forced you to nonsensically wave your arms about to pull off combos hit the Wii not long after its launch, but did little to draw in longtime fans of the classic platforming series. Besides being a mechanical mess thanks to an unwieldy camera and unresponsive controls, the spin-off's character designs took the most flack from both critics and fans alike, because despite the name, it just didn't feel like the franchise everyone knew and loved. And look, I'm all for giving characters a makeover once in a while, but dressing gaming's most famous vampire hunter in bondage gear? Yeah, Simon Belmont deserves more respect than that. Number 8. Mortal Kombat Special Forces. Considered the worst Mortal Kombat game even by the franchise's own developers, Special Forces focused exclusively on main series staple Jax, and attempted to shake up the Mortal Kombat formula by going down the third-person action-adventure route, instead of the classic arena fighting experience that it was famous for. While not a terrible decision on paper, the development of Special Forces was riddled with problems from the get-go. With key staff leaving halfway through and the title going back to the drawing board numerous times, the game was essentially rushed out the door to make its already announced release date. Consequently, the entire experience feels like a soulless attempt to patch together an inherently broken game, with its legacy tainting the idea of MK spin-offs for years and ultimately harming the developer's relationship with publisher Midway in the long run. Number 7. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Fallout's first foray into the console market wasn't a particularly pretty one. Stripping away everything that made the RPG so unique and iconic in the PC community, Brotherhood of Steel attempted to attract a wider audience by dumbing down and simplifying almost all of the series' gameplay mechanics. Instead of mimicking the original's hardcore role-playing gameplay, Brotherhood of Steel was essentially your regular run-of-the-mill hack-and-slash adventure game. While that's already uninspired, the main crime was that it just didn't feel like Fallout. There were no major decisions to be made, no particularly interesting or colourful characters to come across, and the wasteland itself was mostly a pretty bland, grey, uninteresting location to explore. Consequently, Brotherhood of Steel felt like a homogenized mainstream product, a baby step to appease the console market, and a far cry from the confident, towering, and authentic original games in the franchise. Number 6. Death by Degrees. The second spin-off on this list that comes from a popular arena fighter game, Death by Degrees stars Nina Williams from the Tekken series, and just like Mortal Kombat Special Forces, opted to break the franchise mold by adopting a new style of gameplay that was more akin to a third-person brawler. Unlike Mortal Kombat though, Death by Degrees didn't have the luxury of excusing its awfulness on any development troubles. While the story and characters are classically Tekken, in that they're entirely nonsensical and batshit crazy from beginning to end, the fighting and controls make for some of the most frustrating and broken gameplay sections ever put to disc. Which is a shame, because the game boasted one neat idea that was essentially a prototype for the X-ray moves in Mortal Kombat. But at its core, Death by Degrees felt like nothing more than a cheap attempt to cash in on the franchise and the sex appeal of the main character, and is something even Tim from Spaced would have a hard time loving. Number 5. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. With the release of Resident Evil 6 and Operation Raccoon City, 2012 looked like the year that could have killed the Resident Evil series for good. Although the former stole most of the headlines, the latter was a half-baked third-person shooter set in the same universe as the main series, but played almost like the exact antithesis of what everyone originally loved about the core Resident Evil experience. Bearing little resemblance to the main franchise itself, the entire Resident Evil theme seemed tacked on to an otherwise instantly forgettable shooter. While playing through the title, you can't quite escape the feeling that without the name recognition that allowed the game a lot of mainstream press, this brainless zombie of a third-person shooter would have ended up as nothing more than a low-budget download-only game you'd find at the bottom of the Steam sale. Number 4. The Walking Dead Survival Instinct. Just like its visuals, The Walking Dead Survival Instinct feels ugly from start to finish. From the lifeless world to the uninspired combat to the rudimentary stealth, the entire experience feels just about as sterile and as by the numbers as the later seasons of the actual show. Even worse, Activision's attempt at a Walking Dead game came mere months after Telltale's epic and critically lauded Season 1 of its Walking Dead experience, and thus players were shown the two extremes of titles that can fall at either end of the licensed video game spectrum. Where one feels like a labour of love, the other plays like a heartless attempt to cash in on one of the most popular TV shows currently airing today, and even the scant few ideas that were there were hampered by the evidently rushed development time that plagues so many tie-in games. Number 3. The Bureau, XCOM Declassified. Originally intended to be a first-person shooter reboot of the revered 90s strategy series, the negative reception that 2K's revival attracted for foregoing the series' roots resulted in it scampering off to tone down the obvious Bioshock influences that had seeped in during development. The new and improved version eventually released in 2013, adopting a third-person perspective and including a strategy-based paused option to satisfy old-school fans, but ultimately declassified because apparently all of these crappy spin-off games need to have that in the title, launched to a tepid reception, unable to decide exactly what it wanted to be. For whatever reason, 2K neglected to reveal that Enemy Unknown, a more loyal interpretation of the series' roots, was also in the works and ended up launching first, no less. By the time Declassified had rolled around, every original XCOM fan had what they wanted already. The version made by committee launched with little to no fanfare and faded into obscurity shortly thereafter. Number 2. Final Fantasy All the Bravest. Very few games make the transition from consoles to mobile platforms elegantly and unscathed. With the temptation to rely on microtransactions and lazy production values, there's plenty of pitfalls that come with creating a mobile game out of an established franchise. Unfortunately, Final Fantasy All the Bravest fell into every single one of these pitfalls, worked themselves out, and then fell into them again. Less of an actual attempt at a game, this iOS title felt more like an exercise in seeing how many in-game items players were willing to shell out for before they got fed up and deleted the so-called game off their device forever. While a lot of mobile titles, even the best ones, rely on microtransactions, All the Bravest's implementation of them was so in your face, so obtrusive and obnoxious that it ruined whatever good ideas may have been found in this Final Fantasy experience. All the Bravest soured the hearts of gamers everywhere, and to this day boasts some of the most scathing, spiteful, and aggressive reviews you can find this side of Metacritic. Number 1. Metal Gear Survive. Metal Gear Survive was doomed from the get-go, and while it shouldn't have been a surprise to see Konami attempt to milk their most popular franchise for all it was worth, they could have at least created the facade that they were trying to remain faithful to the series. Instead, they went down the most asinine route possible, and although it can be, dare we say it, briefly enjoyable at times, it doesn't excuse the fact that Survive is not only derivative, grindy, and plagued with microtransactions, but a blatant attempt at stripping the Metal Gear name down to a bit of scrap metal. Ironically, Survive might have done much better if it didn't use the Metal Gear name, but hey, at least they gave fans an actual game, saving it from a pachinko machine-based death. I mean, I think that's better? So that's our list. Let me know in the comments if I missed any spin-offs more embarrassing than this sorry lot here, and while you're there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists like this every single day. I've been Josh, and I'll see you soon.
Gosh, can you believe that person said that about that particular video on that entry? I sure can't. But you should like, share and subscribe below anyway. And also, the people who made this video, they're right here. Go follow them and give them some love. Also, there's more content, probably above my head. Check it out. Or don't. 50-50.